Hey guys, welcome back. I hope you are having an amazing day. Let's get right into the stories. The first one is an entitled People Story. I want to share an unsettling experience that I had recently, which unfolded in a series of harrowing events. Brace yourself, as this story will undoubtedly take you on a wild ride. It all began on an ordinary day when I was heading home from work, driving along the bustling highway. Little did I know that this particular journey would become etched in my memory as one of the most nerve-wracking ordeals I've ever faced. As I glanced into my rearview mirrors, I noticed a vehicle swaying erratically, struggling to maintain its lane. It didn't take a genius to discern that the driver was likely under the influence of alcohol. To my astonishment, the car in question turned out to be a tow truck operated by a local company. Knowing the potential danger posed by an impaired driver, especially in a massive tow truck, I decided to take action. Summoning my courage, I dialed the tow company's number using the hands-free feature of my car. I reported the dangerous situation, hoping that the company would intervene and prevent a potential catastrophe. Looking back, I realized that was the moment I unknowingly set the stage for more turmoil to come. Despite the looming uncertainty, I was determined to put a stop to the drunk driver's hazardous behavior. When fate allowed our vehicles to align momentarily, I signaled the driver to roll down his window. Bracing myself, I confronted him about his intoxicated state and informed him that I had reported his actions to his employer. His response was both hostile and reckless, as he hurled his half-empty beer bottle toward my car. Shards of glass flew across the road, shattering the tranquility of the moment and leaving me in a state of disbelief. With my heart racing, I observed the tow truck's behavior growing increasingly erratic. It became evident that this enraged driver intended to retaliate against me for exposing his reckless behavior. The gravity of the situation sank in, and I realized I was in grave danger. Determined to protect myself, I managed to maneuver my car slightly ahead of his, making it difficult for him to make direct contact. The chase continued even after I exited the highway and embarked on the winding journey home. Fear coursed through my veins as I observed the relentless tow truck doggedly tailing my every move. Sensing the urgency of the situation, I reached out to the police, explaining the unfolding events and my deep sense of unease. I implored them to meet me at my residence, where I hoped to find solace and safety. To my dismay, when I arrived home, there were no authorities awaiting my arrival. Cornered by circumstances, I pulled into my driveway, preparing myself mentally and physically for a confrontation with this vengeful driver. The tension in the air was palpable as he glared at me disdainfully before finally driving past. Feeling shaken but relieved, I hoped this nightmare would conclude, and I could put it all behind me. However, life had other plans. The next morning, as I walked out to my driveway, my heart sank. My car, my prized possession, had vanished without a trace. Panic set in, and I immediately contacted the police to report the theft. With the recent events fresh in my mind, I couldn't help but check the security camera footage I had installed for a different purpose, protecting my porch from package thieves. Reviewing the recording, my worst fears were confirmed. A tow truck from the same company responsible for the previous incidents had brazenly towed my car right from my own property. It was an outrageous violation. Enraged, I demanded to speak with the owner of the company, eager to rectify the situation and retrieve my car without any additional costs. Regrettably, the owner's response was callous and infuriating. He acknowledged that the tow was conducted illegally, but insisted I would still need to pay a retrieval fee to reclaim my stolen vehicle. Refusing to yield to such injustice, I spent hours on the phone with law enforcement, seeking an official document to prove the illegality of the tow and establish my ownership. These endeavors required me to take time off work, but thankfully my understanding boss supported my cause. Armed with the necessary evidence, I hailed a cab and made my way to the towing company, clutching the official documentation. With unwavering determination, I confronted the owner, demanding the return of my car without any additional fees. The tension in the room grew thick as I waited for the situation to unfold. Relief washed over me as the owner conceded, agreeing to waive the towing fee. However, the retrieval fee still loomed like an oppressive cloud. Once again, I contacted the police, determined to have them present while negotiating with the unscrupulous boss. Their presence would ensure fairness and prevent any further manipulation. At last, after the authorities arrived and confronted the owner, I was finally reunited with my beloved car. Unfortunately, concrete evidence linking the thief to the towing incident remained elusive. Nevertheless, justice had a way of catching up with the wicked. As fate would have it, the universe had more in store for this drunken menace. Months later, a breakthrough occurred. Desperate to recover my stolen work bag, which contained my tablet, I utilized its tracking feature to locate the thief's whereabouts. Accompanied by the police, we arrived at a residential address, a door I had seen before. To my astonishment, the door swung open, and there stood the drunk tow truck driver, glaring at me with a mix of anger and recognition. Instantly, the pieces of the puzzle fell into place, solidifying the evidence against him. The police apprehended him, leading to his arrest for drunk driving, theft, and even littering on the highway. The consequences for his actions would be severe. A year-long jail sentence awaited him, encompassing charges of theft and the unlawful use of a tow truck. Moreover, his license was revoked, ensuring he would never wreak havoc behind the wheel again. It was a small consolation for the trauma he had caused. Reflecting upon the chaotic chain of events that unfolded due to his reckless decisions, I hoped that this man would undergo a profound transformation and learn from the consequences he faced. As I bring this tale to a close, I sincerely wish that no one else falls victim to such a perilous situation. May we all exercise caution and act responsibly, ensuring the safety of ourselves and others on the road. And to that drunken tow truck driver, I sincerely hope he uses this time of reflection to mend his ways and contribute positively to society. The next one is a pro-revenge story. This story starts 31 years ago, but the revenge part was pure serendipity that began 2 years ago. I'm going to shorten most parts because it's a crazy ride, but I'll be happy to answer any questions y'all have. I learned a lot on this journey, and part of the reason for this write-up is to share that with others. The beginning. In 1990, when I was just out of middle school and my sister was still in elementary, my dad met his third wife at the only gas station in our town. They soon moved in together, and my dad abandoned us in our basement apartment to live on a shanty houseboat that didn't run, to live with her. He would show up every other week and give me $40 for groceries. Eventually, someone figured out the situation and called my mom. We went to live with her, which was, believe it or not, worse. My dad and his shanty wife got married in 1991. Not long after, she called me and told me my dad's brain tumor had returned. It hadn't, and that he couldn't handle the stress of being around us. She claimed that the only people he could bear to be around were her and her son, Shorty, who was my age. When I called my dad to ask if this was true, he said it wasn't, and he just couldn't believe that she would say that to begin with. That was one of our last conversations until 2 years ago. The middle? There's not much in this part. I worked my way through college, living in my car from time to time. My dad and I had no contact, but I heard from family that he'd bought a house and put his son through some vocational classes. When my grandmother died, Shorty and shanty wife showed up in a truck and took all the furniture and anything else that wasn't tied down or already gone. Eventually, I went no contact with my dad's side of the family. I struggled for years, decades really, but I made it. And I have a great job and a good family now. The best revenge is living well, right? The pre-end warm-up. 2 years ago, October 2019, I got a call from my dad's brother, Alan. He told me my dad was in a nursing home in another state. Great. And I needed to go see him because he needed my help. WTF. Shorty had ghosted him. The nursing home, coincidentally, was about 20 minutes from my house, and I saw an opportunity, so I went. The reunion was underwhelming. I didn't want to make amends, but I did want to hear how he wound up dumped and all alone in another state, and it was a really, really good story. Shanty wife got lung cancer and put my dad in a nursing home before she died in 2017. She suffered, and I was happy to hear it, but sad it wasn't ass cancer. Shorty became his power of attorney, POA, when she died and had been visiting my dad, living in my dad's house with his 2 children, and taking care of my dad's affairs since his mom died. But now he was MIA, and my dad was worried about him. He asked me to drive the hour and a half to his house to check on everything. That's all he wanted. He never even asked me how I had been. I agreed to go, I think out of morbid curiosity. I'd never even been to my dad's house. I did want to see where he lived with his real family for 30 years. I wanted to see what could have been my life. It was 50 shades of awful. The grass hadn't been cut all summer. You couldn't get to the front door because of the overgrowth. There were 3 pickup trucks in the yard. 2 were full of trash. Cabs and beds and back seats, just trash. Mail, clothes, paper, shoes, garbage bags. I couldn't understand it. My dad's handicapped modified SUV was on 4 flats and full of garbage too. I didn't have a key, so I just walked around. From the windows I could look through, the inside was in shambles and hoarded to hell. On the front and carport doors were dozens of notices from the city that they were going to condemn the place. The carport was also hoarded, boxes and boxes stacked on each other, most rotting from the rain. The yard was full of garbage, broken Christmas ornaments, more shoes, rusted tools, old toys. There was a letter in the mailbox notifying him that since the house was abandoned, mail would not be delivered anymore. That night, I Googled powers of attorney and how to use them. I went back the next day and showed my bedbound dad the pictures on my phone. He vowed to beat Shorty's ass, then asked me to help more. I told him I would, but he'd have to sign power of attorney over to me. All of it durable, financial, and medical. If he didn't, he could figure this out by himself. He agreed, so I set about finding a lawyer who would drive to another state and do the paperwork in the nursing home. Bless that lawyer for being so good at his job, because all I did was tell him what I knew, and he put together a beautifully bulletproof POA. It was full of stuff I didn't even know I would need. He also filed the paperwork to revoke Shorty's POA, and now I'm unstoppable. We're from a small rural town, and it's the kind of creepy, landlocked place that no matter how long you've been gone or how far away you've been, when you go back, you'll see someone you know. Even if you don't know, you know them. It's like playing 7 Degrees of Everybody all the time. It's suffocating, but it can also be helpful. The beginning of the end. I got to work the next morning. I didn't know how scorched the earth would be when I finished, and I didn't want Shorty or anyone from his prolific inbred family trying to find me, so I made sure nothing I did had my name on it. I opened a Google account for my dad and got a Google number. I opened a P.O. box for him in his town. I put in a mail forwarding notice. I pulled his credit report. I took the POA to my dad's small-town bank, changed the address on his accounts, and got new account numbers. I requested copies of every transaction back to the day Shanty Wife had died, about 13 months worth. I had to go to the main branch, 2 hours from my house, the next day to pick up the records. I sat in the lobby all afternoon, going through the accounts. I cornered a service rep and got a crash course in his debits and deposits. This is when I figured out the extent of Shorty's staggering stupidity. My dad received about $5,000 a month in disability and Social Security every month. Twice a week, Shorty was going into a branch and withdrawing cash, all of the cash, for 13 months. And every time he did it, as the POA, he had to sign a form stating that he was acting on behalf of my dad, and that form was notarized by the bank. I went through every withdrawal and got the bank to confirm that every one of them was made by Shorty. Then I went to the house and called a locksmith. I knew it was bad, but I had no idea what was waiting for me there. He got the first door open, and the stench rolled out like a fog bank. We both gagged. 2 locks later, I was so embarrassed by what he had to see and smell, I gave him a $60 tip. And with shiny new keys in hand, I called the cops. I told them I was POA for my dad, was checking on his house, and there were 3 vehicles there that didn't belong to him. He asked me if I knew who they belonged to. I said no, and I wanted them towed. He told me to call a tow company and he would meet them there. They showed up with 2 wreckers. The tow truck guy got out and asked me for a signature. I only signed my first name. As I was signing, he asked, "Do you know Shorty?" Running on pure hatred at this point, I surprised myself. "Do you?" I asked. He said he did, and that he's an a-hole. I responded, "He might be. Hey, can you do me a favor? If you see him, will you tell him MNWNM is coming for him?" His bravado evaporated. He knows a crazy idiot when he sees one. They towed the trucks. When everyone was gone, I opened the door in the carport to peek in. The sun was going down, and it was dark in the house. I heard something faint, and after some seconds realized it was the roaches and the rats doing their roach and rat stuff. I could smell it all in my hair. I sat on the carport steps and watched the sun go down. I was mad. Just so ducking cosmically livid that 72 hours was all it took to dissolve 3 decades. And here I was, stinking and listening to the rats and cleaning everyone else's crap up. Taking time away from my family, and for what? I had a coming to Jesus with myself. I could either bow out now or double down. And the thing is, I'm tenacious. To a goddamn fault. I had to be to survive, and this was a bone I couldn't put down. The thought of Shorty's life being upended, his only source of income, probably, disappearing literally overnight, and my dad having to hear secondhand from me that he's broke and alone, made me absolutely giddy. I desperately wanted them both to lose what they had left. So I decided I was going to triple dog down. That night, I Googled restraining orders, and it was surprisingly easy to get one. I went to the courthouse in my hometown, went to the clerk's office, and told her I needed a restraining order. I filled the form in at a rickety little table while I was there. I wasn't prepared to see a judge that day, but she took the form and said, "Okay, I'll see if the judge is still here." That kind of scared me. She took me to his chambers, and as I was waiting, I looked around and saw he had certificates of appreciation hanging up from various veterans groups. Then I wiped my palms and thought, fish in a ducking barrel. He asked about my dad's stint in the Marines, and about the DoD office logo on my sweater. I'm a contractor. He read my form and granted the temporary order. I would have to go back for the permanent one, where Shorty would be able to argue against it. Then I went home and Googled biohazard companies and elder abuse statutes in my state. I hired a biohazard company to remove all the crap from the house for $7,000. I would have paid double. They found my dad's mummified dog under some pizza boxes in the master bedroom. They sent me pictures and salvaged some papers. Shorty was served during this time and a hearing was set. I got to work collecting and documenting crap. I took pictures and made spreadsheets and timelines with cross-references because, duck it, now they had my full attention. The paid versions of Truthfinder and Trello seriously got me through all this. In my spare time, I went to the nursing home and gave my dad 8x10 copies of the pictures of his dead dog from every angle. Before court, I went to the police station nearby and told them I wanted to report an elder abuse crime. A white-collar detective came out and told me it was a domestic matter, and that since Shorty had been POA, everything he had done was legal. And this was the day I got to teach a small-town detective about the fiduciary responsibilities of a POA. Thanks, Google. I handed him a copy of the statute with the applicable sections highlighted. Then I handed him a thick folder with bank statements, pictures of the hoarded house and dead dog, a copy of my dad's credit report that showed he was tens and tens of thousands of dollars in debt, and a spreadsheet listing every cash withdrawal with a running total of the stolen amounts. The grand total was just over $130,000 in cash. That's not including the lost value of the house or the credit cards he opened and used. I told him he could keep that folder since it wasn't the only one I had. Then I told him I would wait for a case number, and I sat down. He came back about 30 minutes later and apologized, said I had a case, and gave me a case number. Then I headed over to the courthouse. This is the end. There were other people there, and I had to wait my turn. And while I was waiting, that stupid mother ducker schlepped his sloppy ass into the courtroom by himself and obviously, literally, non-metaphorically dirty. His shoes were untied, and that turned my giggle box over. Then it was our turn, and we stood up. The same judge asked me some questions, asked him some questions, and asked me if I had any proof. I had a very thick folder of it. The judge asked me if I had gone to the police. Well, yes, sir, I have. Do you have a case number? As a matter of fact, the order was granted permanently and for life, but not before the judge halted proceedings and told Shorty he needed a lawyer. Someone told me that the courthouse would have a copy of my dad's DD 214 discharge papers, so while I was there, I got a copy of those because why not? I also used my POA to take Shanty Wife off the deed to the house. That way, if my dad died and it went into probate, Shorty had no immediate claim. I also went and got copies of my dad's birth certificate and Shanty Wife's death certificate. Technically, stepchildren can't request that info, but the clerk who waited on me recognized my dad's name and told me she lost her virginity to my Uncle Alan in the 60s and went to my grandparents' funeral. So I got all the forms I wanted. Shanty Wife left my dad $50,000 in life insurance. About $35,000 of that was left since Shorty was spending my dad's money and not his mom's. So I opened an Ally account and transferred every penny over. Then I set up recurring transfers for the monthly deposits. At any given time, there was no more than $100 in his account. I also found a house flipper that paid me enough for the house to pay off his mortgage. That's the thing about probate. There's nothing to fight over if there's nothing there, and I made sure there was ducking nothing there. My dad died thinking he still owned a house. Speaking of which, this is about the time I found my dad's life insurance policies. They were up to date, and Shanty Wife was the beneficiary. My POA didn't allow me to change beneficiaries, but it allowed me to assign them, and since Shanty Wife was dead, there was technically no beneficiary. This is where the death certificates came in handy. I assigned my sister and me as beneficiaries. Irrevocable, too, which means that the only way to change that is for my dad and me and my sister to agree to it. I kept my dad in the dark about all this. The only thing he ever really knew about was the restraining order and his dead dog. I found out that he had purchased the gravesite next to Shanty Wife and wanted to be buried next to her. That was just never going to ducking happen. I Googled national cemeteries and found out he qualified to be in one since he was a disabled Vietnam-era veteran. so I arranged for that instead. All the cherries on top. My dad died in June this year, and I was there. He's buried in a national cemetery far away where no one will ever go visit him. The only obituary I ran was on the funeral home's website, and that only for insurance purposes. I wrote it as vague as possible. There was no service. His urn is purple, the color he hated most. I got a call in August from the prosecutor's office in my hometown. The lady on the other end is married to my first cousin because, of course, she is. That's how it works there. Shorty was arrested just after midnight on July 1st, was still in jail, and had been arraigned on felony elder abuse charges. He's facing 10 years in FPMITA prison. She told me not to expect the trial anytime soon, as it can take up to 3 years for that to happen. I told her that was awesome since the uncertainty will hopefully haunt him. And after all that, he's still got prison to look forward to. He lost his kids. He lost his dad. I'm spending his mom's cancer money. He lost his free house and trucks. He has no credit and will never be able to get any sort of decent job and will, hopefully for a long time, not be able to find a decent place to live. And I sleep like a ducking baby. Thank you for watching. I would really appreciate it if you could like the video and subscribe to our channel if you haven't already. We'll see you again tomorrow.